the meeting, the monthly meeting of the Mayor's Budget Advisory Commission. We'll start with a land acknowledgement. A land acknowledgement is a formal statement that recognizes and respects Indigenous peoples and the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and the land. I want to acknowledge that we live and work on the unceded land of the Dena'ina people, and we thank them for their past, present, and future stewardship on the land in which we live. We'll start with the roll call. Is Ms. Hall present?
Here.
Ms. Hodge?
Here.
Mr. King?
Here.
Mr. Clouda? Mr. Solt?
Here.
Ms. McConnell? Mr. Minor? Ms. Rodriguez?
Here.
And Mr. Smallwood? And Ms. Brawley?
I'm here.
All right, and I'm Lindsay Hobson here, present as well. So has everyone had a chance to take a look at the agenda before them? And is there a motion? Can I get a motion to approve?
Tasha, move to approve the agenda.
This is Melissa, I'll second.
Okay. And so our first item is I'm stepping down as chair. It's been a really great opportunity to serve you all in this capacity. And to be honest, Anna Brawley has really carried a lot of the weight to do this. And I just really appreciate her, and it's time for me to step down. And so with that, let's see. Do we have a nomination? We'll open it up for nominations for a new chair, and I would just like to nominate Anna Brawley to be chair. I think that she has really put in a lot of work, and like I mentioned, she's really carried a lot of the weight of this position in the last 6 months, and I would like to give her an opportunity to continue to chair this commission in that capacity. Do I have a second? Or are there any other nominations for chair?
And this is Anna. I'll just say I accept the nomination.
Great. Thank you.
So, Lindsay, this is Jonathan. I would, I know that Anna has already accepted. I would second that nomination. Anna's done a great job stepping in when you've been unavailable, and she's really shown herself to be a really good steward of the meetings and of participation. And so happily second that nomination.
Great. So if there's no other nominations, I'm going to close nominations. Does someone want to make a motion to approve Anna as a nominee for chair?
I'd like to make a motion to approve. This is Alyssa.
Thank you, Alyssa. Is there a second?
This is Nolan. I'll second.
Okay, great. Well, congratulations, Anna.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah.
do I vote? Do we? Oh, sorry. So now do we go through and vote? Is that the process?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great.
And Lindsay, sorry, before we do that, just to say, so I'm currently vice chair.
That's
So
right.
when I step into the role of chair, we're you know, unless something changes in the next few seconds, then we will also need a vice chair, just to say.
That's right. That's right. Okay, so we'll start with the voting on Ms. Brawley as BAC chair. Ms. Hall,
Yes.
Ms. Hotch,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
and Mr. Cloud. I see that you've joined us. I may
Yes.
have missed you before. Sorry. Sorry, did I miss it?
Oh, sorry. Yes, and I joined a little. I joined
Okay.
a little.
And Mr. Salty, or
Yes.
Salt, sorry.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, sorry about that. Ms. McConnell. Ms. Rodriguez.
Yes.
And have Mr. Minor or Mr. Smallwood joined us?
I see someone on the phone, but I don't know. Otherwise, I don't see them.
Okay, all right. All right, the motion carries, and Ms. Brawley is our new president or chair for BAC. Welcome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And Lindsay, we communicated before the meeting if this was the outcome, but I have to leave a few minutes early today, so I was asking if you would still plan to chair this meeting, if that's okay.
Yes.
If folks are okay with that.
Mhm. Yeah, so moving on to vice chair. So Ms. Brawley has formally stepped down as vice chair. Are there any nominations for a vice chair?
This is Anna. I'll nominate Nolan Clouda.
This is Jonathan. I'll happily second that.
And this is Nolan. I would accept that nomination.
Okay. Are there any other nominations?
And this is Nolan. But by the way, one quick thing that I wanted to mention. I had chatted with Anna briefly before this, but I know that I've had my chance in the in leadership, and if there was someone else on the group that was really interested in serving as vice chair, I wouldn't want to take that opportunity from them. But I am also happy to help the commission in this capacity too. So I did want to put that out there, that I don't want to crowd out anyone else.
Thanks, Nolan. I appreciate that. I don't hear any other nominations, so I will go ahead and close the nominations. And do I have a motion to approve Nolan Clouda as the nomination for chair?
Alyssa, I'll make a motion to approve. This is Carolyn. I'll second.
All right, and we'll go ahead and vote. Ms. Hall,
Yes.
Ms. Hotch,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. Salt,
Yes.
Ms. Rodriguez, Mr. Smallwood, and I don't know if they've joined. Mr. Minor. Oh, I'm sorry.
This is Alyssa. I'm sorry. I had to step away. I would like to put my vote in for Nolan. My apologies for missing that.
Oh, no, that's great. That's great. Mr. Minor, I believe they're still absent, and Ms. Brawley.
Yes. For
Okay,
Nolan.
and I will also vote in favor of Nolan for the vice chair. Thank you, Nolan, and congratulations.
Thank you very much.
All right, so moving on to our reports, part C of the agenda. Do we have someone from the Assembly to give the Assembly report?
Yes, I'm here, Madam Chair.
All right.
This is Assemblymember Dunbar. I'm one of the chairs of the Budget Committee. So yeah, I'll just give a quick report. I think I'm trying to think the last time we met, if we had passed the bond or not. I don't think we had. We just talked about it. So at any rate, we passed the bond packages, so they'll go before the voters. 3 or 4 of the bond packages were unchanged. We did make amendments to the road and park bonds that increased their size. I'll say that we also received a presentation from Mr. Clauda in his sort of academic role, private role, a few days later, speaking about the benefits of bond packages and putting our relative debt load into perspective, and also sort of the size of these bonds adjusted for inflation versus historical bonds. And it's clear that they are very much in sort of the main line of where we have been before. And indeed, in some ways, we are healthier now economic or sort of financially than we have been in the past with our debt. We also passed a legislative program last week that is sort of the unified document between the mayor's office and the assembly for what we're going to ask of Juneau. And it should come as no surprise that the ask this year is basically the same as the ask in years past, which is please help us repair the Port of Alaska at Anchorage, because it is a crucial lifeline for the state. And specifically, we're asking for $600 million to do that. There was also a $15 million ask for homelessness projects that started out as just for a navigation center at Tudor and Elmore. I proposed and we passed an amendment that divided that $15 million into 5 buckets, which is sort of consistent with what the facilitated process has been doing with this sort of multi-pronged approach that's been going forward simultaneously. So it'll be $5 million for the aforementioned navigation center, $5 million for supportive and workforce housing, and $5 million for a new special population shelter, which we haven't yet identified a location for. We also, relevant to the work of this commission, we also confirmed Cheryl Frasca on Tuesday night unanimously. And we had a work session last week, which I'm not sure if, I think Anna might have been there, but if any of you want to go back and listen to it, I think it's really valuable. It was about valuations and the assessor's office. I know that we've gotten a lot of questions, and certainly just at community council last night, there was a discussion about the increase in valuations we've seen in most residential properties. And the assessor's office sort of walked through why they went up. I mean, I don't think it's a mystery. Everyone knows that we have a seller's market here, and prices really increased last summer. If you tried to buy a house last summer, I had a friend that, houses were going for tens of thousands of dollars over asking price, and they were being snapped up really quickly. And so that has led to an increase in these valuations. I think one of the important points that Ms. Frasca made, she had a nice little presentation for us, was that just because your property value went up, let's say 10%, doesn't mean your property taxes are going to go up that much. And it has to do with the way the tax cap works, right? So the tax cap says we can collect a certain amount of property taxes, X, and then that's divided by the total valuation of the city. And so the properties in the city. So if those valuations go up, then everybody's proportionate share goes down a little bit. So in theory, the mill rate, or rather if their share of the property taxes stays the same, then the mill rate should fall. Now, in this case, because we had commercial properties that lost value, I think you should expect some increase in residential property taxes, but it won't be, again, I don't believe it'll be a 1-to-1 because of that fluctuation in the mill rate. So that is it for now. And again, I'm happy to answer any specific questions on any of those points.
Does anyone have any questions for Assemblymember Dunbar? I also want to note that Assemblymember Weddleton has joined us, as has Mr. Smallwood, so thank you both. And I also want to recognize and congratulate Ms. Frasca on the confirmation. and welcome to OMB officially.
Oh, one last thing, Lindsay. Our next Budget and Finance Committee meeting will be 12:10 on Thursday, February 17th. So again, if anyone would like to join us, we're always happy to have BAC members there.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on, do we have someone from the school district?
This is Andy. I'm here, and Jim Anderson, our CFO, is here, and I think I saw Carl Jacobs as well. Our first agenda item looked to be a follow-up discussion on the SROs and whether or not that would be allowable or considered an in-kind contribution by the Muni to the district. So I think Mr. Thompson had called in last time requesting the BAC to look into that. And really, as kind of a brief recap, an in-kind contribution would be to say the state puts a cap on how much we can collect in local taxes or other contributions. So if we were to be able to have, in simple terms, if we had $100 million local contribution and SROs cost $2 million, if the city paid for those SROs, in concept, if it was considered an in-kind contribution, we could collect $98 million in cash and $2 million in SRO services. With the district's position has always been that that's police work being done in schools and not instructional work, so it's outside of that, not considered an in-kind contribution. And I saw a follow-up email from Mr. King that really kind of outlined that and outlined the statutes and administrative code that kind of supported that position as well. So if we have any follow-up discussion on that, I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on that because we want to get through our budget, but that was just to kind of get that out there and what our position on the SROs is, as far as if it's funded by the city, you know, how it's treated per the state cap.
I see Mr. King has his hand up.
Yeah, so first of all, Andy, thanks for starting with that. And I would just confirm, I mean, maybe we need to publish something and it could just be as simple as a letter from me to the chair, but Alaska statute is pretty clear about what is considered to be an in-kind contribution. It feels also very clear that police services do not count as an in-kind contribution underneath either the local minimum or the local maximum contribution. And so, I mean, you know, only a court would tell us in the end, but I think it's very reasonable to presume that that the provision of police services through the police budget as opposed through the ASD budget is not an in-kind contribution under state law, and thus does not count towards either the local minimum or the local maximum. It's pretty clear in law. So thanks, Andy, and now I'll get out of the way of your presentation.
Okay, do you want me to go ahead and we can start the FY23 budget presentation? And the SROs will come up again. It's and that kind of conversation of whether or not it's in kind is kind of irrespective of who actually pays. Like if the school district did pay the bill, then that statute really doesn't have an effect on the calculation either way, in our view. So, but we will start our presentation. Let's see if I can share my screen here. You guys see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
and just to kind of start with, this is the presentation that we gave to the school board at the work session on Tuesday night. There's a recording of it if you want to go back and listen to it, because as Jim and I try to recite the instructional components that are in here and how those are, or I guess how those benefit students, you know, we're certainly not as articulate as our superintendent and the instructional staff. So we'll do our best, but we'll probably go through the instructional components fairly quick so we can spend a little more time on the financial components. So Jim is going to walk through our the first start of the slides, and I'll finish up with the financial things.
Okay, good morning, everyone. This is our budget development timeline. I think everyone in this room probably is already aware that by charter, we have to have our budget approved by the school board and to the assembly by the first Monday in March, so they can have it voted on and approved by the end of March. And it really is, so it gives time for all the tax notices to go out, because that all has to be calculated and the cards printed. It always, we're the first district in the state to pass our budget. One thing that is a reality for us every year is that we're passing a budget, the assembly is approving it while the legislature is still in session. And so there's always the unknowns, whether it would be more money or less money. And over the past several years, our governor has also vetoed, whether it was bond debt reimbursement or tried to veto one-time funds once, but the Supreme Court overruled that. So we're always living this knowledge that if additional money comes, it's going to be much later than when our budget was approved. We're also approving it in February, not knowing for sure exactly how many kids are going to show up 8 months later or 7 months later in August. And certainly with COVID, that has been an impact. And so we were short about $12 million on revenue this year as a result of a lot of students still remaining at either private schools or homeschool or whatever they had chosen outside of the district. But we do have a budget that by state statute is balanced. So, we're pretty comfortable that the vast majority of this will survive as it goes through the school board meetings on the 8th and the 22nd. So we'll see how that goes. But that's our timeline. It really is for Andy and I a year-round process. And a lot of it is we're building it not knowing what the legislature is going to do. And we're building it even after the legislature. We're still waiting on how many students actually show up in the district. So we work this year round, and this brief has been given once and will again next Tuesday night. Slide, please. So this preliminary budget addresses a general fund deficit, and I built a chart that I'll walk you through to show kind of what our structural deficit is. It does prioritize pupil to teacher ratios and education. And you'll see that's where we spent the vast majority of the federal relief funds for next year. And more importantly, it does focus on the school board goals, which were recently approved this past year, and really helped us hone in on just a few areas instead of trying to support all programs and functions across the district as if they were equal. Next slide, please. So these are the ASD core values and beliefs. I don't really have a whole lot to brief on this. We have the next slide where we put things in the budget that go toward making sure we keep the core values and beliefs up on the wall as we're building the budget, to make sure that we're capturing really the main parameters of what we're all about in our schools. And it really is focused on students is the first one, student potential, and the high expectations. The accountability, we work very hard, just like the city, in providing as much visibility of our information, whether it's COVID related or money related or instructional. And our data dashboards have only continued to grow and provide more information, and we'll continue to do that. Under safety, I'm sure everyone is aware that the mayor's budget put the SRO cost of $2.3 million onto the school district. The assembly generously covered it from January to June because it's outside our budget cycle. But we did put it in the budget for next year, and I'm sure there will be discussions at both school board meetings on that topic. On responsiveness, our communications department, we have re-wickered it because there's so many things changing so quickly in the last 18 months that we really had to find a way to reach out to parents and students, everything from what school is going to be open and closed tomorrow, to COVID updates, to security and safety updates. By the way, we've only closed one school since January, and that was Whaley, and all other schools have remained open. And the vast majority of the Ed Center, I think 67 people total, whether they were an AA, a director, a senior director, whatever their position was, hasn't, to include Dr. Bishop, most of the chiefs, have actually substitute teached in order to keep the schools open. So it's been a crazy month plus, but we're really proud of our efforts to keep schools open. Next slide. So about 9 or 10 months ago, we started a strategic plan task force, and we broke out all of those areas that we really needed to start looking at as we build the budget. And instead of looking at it from, this is how much money we have, what can we do with it? We realized that we really needed to look at it opposite to that. We needed to have reading, math, college career life, guardrails broken out. And in each of those, there's lots of work groups with staff from all over the district that have helped pull together over the last 9+ months a lot of potential options to improve student outcomes. Then we took all of those and prioritize them. And then of course it does ultimately come down to how much money. So if you go to the next slide, this is kind of what we started with as we built this budget. We've always looked at grants and we've always looked at other fund sources, but this year we really did take a holistic view of all funds in. How can we maximize across the spectrum of needs to make sure that we can optimize what we're doing next year. And you'll see the general fund at the top, the transportation, student nutrition. We won't be using those outside those, but we are looking to make sure that the transportation can support some of these new growing and emerging initiatives. And you'll see a couple of those on the following slides. We also have the grants that we always have. And the vast majority of the federal grants this year really is the ESSER federal relief money. There's multiple bills currently on the docket at the legislature that potentially could increase education funding. I won't go through all those today. That's a whole long brief, but we're certainly tracking and assisting the legislators with input, information, feedback, and support for those bills. Next slide. So this is just one example of the complexity, because we get a lot of comments from the public and frankly our own staff. Our budget book is about, I don't know, 2.5 inches thick, and it has a lot of information, but you know, some people say, where's the reading money? I want to see where's the budget line for reading. And so we built this chart so we could help visualize and articulate that when we look at reading goals, and we took all of the different work groups within reading and took all of their requests and needs, we looked at every possible fund source that was available to the district, and we tried to find the most appropriate fund source. If you look at all of the title grants, in fact, most grants are very limited into what you can actually use that money for. And then we looked at if it's a short-term thing, a one-time thing, or is this something that we're going to have to keep for the next, you know, a multi-year strategy on something. If it's short-term, you try to use grant money. And even if it's restrictive, you find the right grant and you try to focus on that. If it's long-term, you try to use the general fund, knowing that what you don't want to do is start a multi-year program and then cancel it next year because you don't have the funds to do it. So I didn't make a slide for every one of the priorities, But I think it does paint a good picture of that's why you won't see a budget line that says reading and how much does reading cost. It's all over the budget book. Slide, please. We also have the board goals, which I talked about. Those are online on our websites and in flyers all over the city. And Carl is here. I'm sure he would be more than happy to talk about those if there are questions. Slide. And these are some of the instructional initiatives that we're applying towards reading. So the bottom line is if a kid can't catch up to reading by the time they're in third grade, most of them, and it's somewhere around 80%, never really catch up through high school. So it is critical to try to catch kids early and get them caught up. Now they can catch up, but it just costs more money and more resources at those higher grades. If you can catch them while they're really young, pre-K and kindergarten, first grade, then you certainly set those students up for being lifelong educators. And so that's really our focus. When you look at the reading initiative, the vast majority of this is at elementary school, and the vast majority of it really does go from pre-K to 6, although there's also some in middle school as well. Slide, please. On math, same thing. Now we do have a different focus on math in Career College Life Ready, which is the next one, but that's high school. The bulk of what you see on this chart really is at elementary and some at middle school. You can go to the next one, College Career Life Ready. This was really from the community. The school board a couple of years ago had numerous public sessions, surveys, and it was to help define what is College Career Life Ready. They talked to business leaders in the community, through parents, through children, certainly at high school level. And so we're pushing out to expand internships, job shadowing, and career pathways for those students who college may not be what's best for them. We're increasing CTE because we see it all over the city right now. I mean, whether it's construction or drivers, there just aren't enough people who are ready to come into the workforce and fill those job vacancies. So that's really what we're pushing for College Career Life Ready. On the college level, we're going to start having universal PSAT, SAT, and ACT. We're using ESSER funds to cover that for the next couple of years to make that free for those who college is their path forward, to try to help them get a leg up. And then finally, the financial literacy course, we're developing that because that was a need that came from the community saying we really need young workers to come into our workforce, and they already know about checkbooks and all of those things that young adults need to know, or they learn by failure, which is kind of how I learned many, many years ago. So that's that slide. Next one, please. Then we have board guardrails. These are the things that start with the superintendent will not. And on the next slide, we'll cover those a little bit more in depth. Slide. Okay, so the first one was underrepresented in lottery application-based programs. We've actually talked about this in a couple different BAC meetings over the past year or so. And we're starting with, we really had to redo the software because we could tell what ethnicity someone was in once they were accepted, but the software we used, we couldn't tell who applied and who didn't apply. And we also know that we don't know who doesn't know that they can apply. So we're going to go out into the community. We're going to have a fair coming up at the end of this month. And we're really trying to reach out through organizations outside the district that can link to groups of parents to make sure they even know that there are other options, from immersion to Montessori to charter schools, because we do know there are families who don't know that they have multiple options. Oh, and Lindsay, I'm sorry, I see your hand up.
Yeah, just a quick clarifying question. So on this, so it's the superintendent will not, and then the blue box is what they will not do, and then the bullets below is what they will do to ensure the thing above doesn't happen. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
that's, yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, great.
Yes, ma'am. And then you can see the rest of them. We're hiring another recruiter because we really are struggling getting the diverse workforce that we want. And frankly, that also, our percentages kind of mirror Anchorage's businesses as well. But we need to move forward, and instead of just talking about it, we're really going to make some concerted efforts next year to fix, we want our children to be able to see someone who looks like them, and we've got to go find people. As many of you probably have seen in the news, teacher shortages are all over the nation. It's pretty competitive right now to find a teacher and get them to move up here. And we've really got to work hard. We had 100 teacher vacancies for the bulk of this year. And so we know that we have to move forward on that. And then on the mental health services, we are adding several behavioral positions because our behavioral issues in the district have skyrocketed during COVID. Also a national trend, as well as increasing mental health supports. Next slide. Okay, so this is ASD School Funding since 2017. If you built this chart, it's really easy to understand, but I will walk you through it. So the first thing you see, let me pull this up to make sure I have my notes. So if we start at the top down and then from left to right, you'll see the red line at the top depicts the base student allocations inflationary increase based on Anchorage's CPIU from 2017 through 2022. So the state, we have not been flat funded, as this chart shows, but the state's base student allocation, which determines state and local funding, has remained the same really since the legislative session of 2016. So when you look at the red bar, you'll see a spike in FY21, which I think we're all tracking. Inflation is pretty high right now. We did have to project FYs 22 through 24, and we used 2%. Hopefully our nation's leaders can assist in bringing that down, but that's our projection for this slide. The gray, blue, and gold bars that are above the BSA bars, they represent different forms of funding that we have used to make up for those gaps between the inflationary increase in costs and the actual BSA. And they're all in BSA equivalent dollars. So we did convert that, so it's apples to apples chart. So the state of Alaska provided one-time funds in FY19 and FY20 in lieu of a permanent increase to the BSA. So that helped us get through each of those 2 years. We also used fund balance every year except this year, since Dr. Bishop has been the superintendent, to also help with some of those shortfalls. You'll see in FY21 with the start of the original ESSER or CARES Act, we also had federal relief funds under FY22. That $500 BSA equivalent was by and large ESSER 2 or the SRSA. And the vast majority of that we used to maintain, to keep lower class sizes, because we knew that education as long as this pandemic continues, our kids really, that first year, they really had some learning loss. And of course, now it's still happening for some students. When you look at FY23, we're using the vast majority of the remaining ESSER 3 funds to operate the district and implement programs and try to do catch up, all focused on student outcomes for the most part, plus some building safety. And then there's a little bit left in 24, but not much. You'll see that the difference between the projected inflation-proof BSA, and what we'll have in FY24 is a $670 BSA. So that's the fiscal cliff that we've talked about with legislators, with assembly members. And frankly, when we first found out about, increasing our pool costs dramatically and paying for SROs, some of us in the district were well aware that this fiscal cliff was looming. But it is what it is. And we're working with legislators, obviously, quite a lot, and trying to get some type of fix, because what that will represent is a reduction of a significant number of staff for fiscal year 24. So we'll be fine next year. But all of those one-time monies and all of the use of the ESSER money, people that looked at ASD has all this money, what they didn't understand was there was a structural deficit all along by never inflation proofing the BSA, and it was hidden. It didn't mean that we didn't have it. We would come out and say, hey, we're going to start the budget. We got a $30 million shortfall. And then we come up with a balanced budget and everyone's like, oh, why should we believe you? Well, it really was real. The structural deficit is there because about 90% of all of our money goes to people. About 99% of our people are in a collective bargaining group. As a result, you're going to have about a 2% increase in 90% of your costs every single year, which is about 10 to 12 million per year. And it's just going to happen. So I hope this slide is understandable. It is to me and Andy, but if there's any questions, I certainly could entertain them. Or we skip to the next one and I will hand off to the finest Senior Director of Budget in the entire district, Andy Ratliff.
Thank you for the vote of confidence. Okay, so now let's start getting into some more of the financial stuff to get through our presentation. I think you guys will be fairly familiar with this slide. This is the one, we did show this slide with when we presented the pro forma budget to you. And the biggest differences are the pro forma budget had a deficit of, or a change between 22 and 23 of about a little over 20 million. So we did update our demographic projections. We got those in between the pro forma and now. And it looks like we're projecting about 600 student increase over what we had on the pro forma, which was really the same as what as the actual number of students that came back in FY22. So about 600 students more than what we currently have. And that's about 250 ASD neighborhood students, and then charter schools projected another 350 increase in their programs. They do their own projections, so I think 190 of them or so are correspondence, and then the rest of them were facility-based charter schools. But really, you can see about a $16 million decline in revenue, predominantly just due to enrollment changes. We lost about 2,400 students in FY22, below what we had projected, although it was about 15 or almost 1,600 more than FY21. So we did grow, but not as much as we had hoped to. So you see that reflected there, the enrollment changes, and then the hold harmless funding provision that goes away or is going away and or goes down from 50% to 25% of the loss. So as that steps down, we also lose some of the funding there. But yeah, those are the nothing really new here other than just to update it with current enrollment trends. So our ARC plan, or the ESSER spending for FY23 and 24, is listed out here and kind of in some broad categories between trying to meet the board goals. The biggest one of the board goals is the IT instructional support. That is going to be purchasing Chromebooks and maintaining those for our 1-to-1 student-to-device ratio. There's about $2.5 million of instructional software in there for virtual support and other kind of catch-up learning things. And then there's like, I think 17 people in there to help manage those devices at the secondary schools, and then some addenda at the elementary schools. The learning loss initiatives, the summer school, we had a really robust summer school, and it turned out really well. There was a lot of growth within the kids that participated in summer school this year, so we want to keep that going. Reading interventionists are going to be people dispersed to schools with the highest needs. So it'll be just kind of pull out and kind of direct instruction towards those students that need that catch up. These other reading initiatives, these are, it's more of an after school pull out model along with a lot of other things, professional development, things that go in there. But the majority of that cost is trying to get catch up growth on students in after school programs at the elementary level. But far and away, the biggest cost on here is this $56 million to retain the PTR. So part of this was done as a matter of efficiency versus what our targeted cuts might look like if we act, because as you recall, we had like a $67 million deficit that we listed in the pro forma with 91 million in art money remaining to be able to help cover that. So a lot of that money, this 56 million, is going to help cover that that deficit within our general fund that Jim had spoke about, that whole structural deficit. However, you know, when you look at the putting this money towards PTR to balance the budget, had we not had this money, we wouldn't have just put it all to PTR. There would have been across the board cuts, but as a matter of efficiency and thinking of these as kind of one pot of money, we chose to put a big chunk within PTR to be able to effectively manage that without having to add extra staff as grant managers on this ESSER money. Then we're going to continue our virtual program for this year. You can see these go away next year, and that's just because we have $91 million in this, and all this adds up to the 91 million. We just don't have the funds within the ESSER to fund that. There's air quality improvements, which include, I think we have 24 schools that are on a pneumatic system that opens and closes the dampers to facilitate the airflow within those. And we're going to move those to the district standard of a digital control system that's all linked to a head terminal where the folks in maintenance can see that and monitor the airflow. So really improve the air quality in those 24 schools. And then there's 16 schools with outdated or intercoms that are failing that we want to get replaced as well. That's going to be allowable. So we'll try to get those replaced, and that's really just a safety concern within those schools to help facilitate anything there, or facilitate any announcements that they have. We don't want those going out in times of emergency. So this is the ESSER spending plan, and I guess if you have questions.
Yeah, it looks like we got a question from Mr. Salt.
Hey, Andrew, good presentation so far. So just looking at the reading interventionist, and you show that going away, I believe in 24. You previously said that if students aren't able to keep up in K through third grade, that it requires more of an effort to catch them up after that. I know the pandemic's affected, especially the younger children. I think some of the ASD test scores have shown that. Do you expect that to be an issue going forward, where you're going to need to have more catch-up services beyond the third grade?
Yeah, I suspect for at least the first few years or the next few years, we are going to need to put significant resources in there to get kids caught up. The summer school model worked really well, and this reading initiatives, the after school program seems to be working really well. Also, the interventionist we're still kind of fleshing out how the program's going to look and to see what those what the outcomes of those employees are. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, especially for the kids that were on virtual for the first for their kindergarten or first grade year. You know, those kids are further behind than the other ones. So trying to get those kids caught up is going to be a challenge over the next couple of years.
Hey, great.
Just to point out on this slide, we don't plan on using FY24 funds or ESSER funds in FY24, but if this program is successful, compared to all the other initiatives that we put in, we'll reprioritize based off what works. And it doesn't mean that we're going to give up on reading in FY24. It just means that the ESSER money will probably have been exhausted. And if this happened to be something that really showed through analysis that it worked, then we could even expand it using different types of funds. And then other things that didn't work as well would be defunded, which is what we do every year in a budget, of course.
Great. Thanks for the explanation, Jim. Appreciate it.
And we'll have and within our budget book, there will be an appendix at the end that for the ARP spending plan that really details out what goes into all these categories too. So if you're interested in that, we're hoping to have our budget book released to the school board, hopefully tomorrow, if not kind of Monday at the latest. But so that will be coming out, and we can provide the Budget Advisory Commission with the link to those documents if you want to review our full budget book. So other changes we have, pupil transportation. We're not anticipating any changes in service levels. The funding is going to change. We've taken out the general fund contribution that we used to short up in the F22 and replaced that with property taxes to help shore this fund up. In the general fund, we're reducing our general fund property tax ask by about $2.5 million, and then we'll be increasing by almost $3 million in transportation. So about a $500,000 net increase to property taxes for our fiscal year 23. Our transportation funding, it's still based on the 481 per non-correspondent student. That's been in place since I think 2015 or 16. So also, just like the BSA, it hasn't been tied to inflation for many years. But no expected changes in service, so that's good news. Same with student nutrition, not expecting big changes in service. This is kind of right now the model is the federal government has provided free meals for everyone for this year. We're not sure of what they're going to do next year, how the reimbursement programs may change. We are keeping an eye on that, but they feed about 23,000 kids every day. So that's it's a really important thing to keep kids fed so they can continue learning. But yeah, no expected changes in levels of service for student nutrition. It's just kind of waiting to see what who funds it, so you can kind of determine who pays for it. So as far as our general fund expenditures by state function, one thing we did this year, and we've shown this graph in the past where we show all these the things in the kind of brownish color. Those are our school-based supports paid out of the general fund, and then the red would be the ESSER money paid out of the general fund to help for in-school buildings for the most part. The admin support services here, the 31.9 million and the 5.7 in district admin, those are generally just administration costs. So we kept those in blue to say, okay, these aren't actually in the school buildings, certainly important functions. But what really changed is this admin support services, and the way it was presented in prior years. We have a district-wide attrition rate. It's about $20 million or so, and it's a negative amount in our budget to account for employee vacancies, turnover, and a lot of when folks waive medical insurance. So what we did new for this year, so when we always before had that in one single account key, that negative adjustment, so it made this district admin look comparatively small, like it would be in the $8 to $10 million range versus 32. So we took that negative amount and then dispersed it across accounts for all these state functions, so you could see it would provide a more clear picture of how much we anticipate spending net of attrition in all the state functions. So when you see the budget book and you see the year-over-year comparisons on expenditures by state function, you'll notice the admin support services jump considerably. However, it's just most of that's a function of how we do accounting versus actual costs. And you'll see 3 years of actuals where you have actuals in the $20+ million range, and then a 22 budget that's like 5 million, and then a 23 budget that's like 30 million. So it kind of looked funny, but I just wanted to provide that context that we did have a kind of a change in accounting practice or in budget practice where we dispersed those attrition funds across all functions. The other thing, here's the bottom part of this is really just the update of how much we spend in different areas. As Jim said, it's 86% salaries and benefits. So whenever the district does make reductions, it's generally has to be from people. Our PTR is not going to change. We've been able to, again, we kept that stagnant for FY23, but predominantly by adding $56 million in ARP money to be applied towards retaining that class size. And we know these are one-time funds, but really in the middle of a pandemic, it would be, I don't know that we'd get a lot of support for increasing class sizes and putting more kids in the class when there is a pandemic. So retaining those class sizes are very important for us at this time. And, hopefully we'll be able to get funding in the future once we meet that fiscal cliff and be able to retain those class sizes into perpetuity. So we had some enrollment-based changes. I think we reduced about 60 FTE overall, predominantly at middle and elementary schools, as that's where the enrollment has declined. High schools, they increased their enrollment slightly, so they're added teachers to that. We really didn't see much of a decrease in high school students during the pandemic. They came back about the same rate as we had predicted. So that was good. And I think it's more just the variety in the programs that are offered at the high school, all the sports and clubs and everything that kids want to be involved that they may not otherwise be able to at either private schools or as important at elementary or middle schools.
Hey, Mr. Andy, real quick, I think that we're kind of getting short on time. Do you think that maybe 5 minutes left?
I will speed this along.
Okay, and then I also noticed another question from Randy or for Mr. Salt. So if I wanted to give him an opportunity if he still had a question.
No, real quick, I just saw that I think it was the previous slide, the amount of Easter funds we're getting, and just looking at that as a temporary solution. At some point, Easter 2, Easter 3 will run out, and does that leave us with a shortfall that we'd have to make up for, or are these truly COVID relief funds that would go away once we ease out of the pandemic?
Right, that's a great question. I mean, as we put that $56 million in PTR, those are classroom teachers that are doing the same work as they would be doing if we had an inflation-proof BSA, right? So this 68 million here, this is predominantly classroom teachers, and if that goes away, we really do have less money, and we have to be able to make up those reductions if state or other sources of funding don't come through.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. Thank you.
All right, moving along pretty quick. The other elementary, we've kept our PTR in elementary the same since 2017. So we put a lot of effort to be able to try to do that through one-time funds or however it might be, but really putting a focus on that. You can see these other metrics for elementary schools, a nurse, librarian, BPO, and office admin are all just kind of standard for every school. And then kindy TA in every classroom for 3.5 hours. Middle schools, we had, I think, a reduction at Golden View and security based on our 450 to 1 metric for security. But other than that, the other changes are generally just enrollment related for teaching staff. High schools, we're not making any changes. They really had about the same enrollment as they did as we had projected for this year. So not a lot of change there other than a couple of teachers that we added based on enrollment. Alternative schools, this is always a little bit different because they're almost all of them are based purely on need of the program, like the variety of programs between like the middle college or virtual or King Tech, they all have these specialized niches and need different personnel to do that. We did add a counselor into AMCS and we reduced one of their teaching positions to pay for it. And then we've added a half of a nurse into Benny Benson. It used to be that nurse was split with another account, but I think we've had a nurse there the whole time, but we're just kind of catching our budget up to what practice has been. The only other thing to note was New Path closed for this year. The state funded it for us just because they didn't tell us it was closing until the school year had started. But those staff are moved over to McLaughlin, and all the students that were at the Anchorage jail receiving these New Path services have been moved over to McLaughlin if they're under age 18 as well. The ones that are 18 or older will be going into the Department of Justice GED track if they so choose. So other bigger changes, the school-based changes, there's, we talked about the enrollment, we talked about the Easter grants, and this doesn't match up with the 477 that we listed as the difference in the PTR adjustment. but this is reflective of the difference between what we paid for of classroom teachers in our CSRSA Act grant this year and moved those over to ARP. So that's part of the 477. However, this is purely general fund. So just a little context of why those numbers don't quite match up. The other big one is 20 TAs. Those were moved out of, when we moved those TAs to the CSRSA Act for this year, we moved them back into the general fund for next year. Just more of as a matter of efficiency to have less pots of money or less people to pay for out of the grant and be able to track. But aside from that, there's not a whole lot of big changes. The charter school changes, it does look like a drop, but they're doing the same thing as the district is moving a lot of their staffing over to the ESER grant. We're adding 19 special ed personnel. A lot of these are focused on behaviors and behavior supports, and then as well as pre-K classrooms. So as we keep expanding those offerings, trying to get the kids on grade level for reading and starting them really early, that's we're expanding on that. And then all the behavior intervention things. That's a big thing this year is folks that come back from pandemic, and we hear a lot of need for these behavior supports. District-wide changes, there's an increase in human resources by about 5 FTE, and that's including recruiters and things to help, as Jim talked about with the diversity things and all those other, just trying to get staffing. So really trying to bolster that department to be able to respond to the needs in employment. Some other small changes, the bigger ones down here, when we get to this is, you'll see the bigger ones to note, I guess, would be one, these IT ones. We did add quite a bit of money to fund the switches, time clocks, and Google storage, and then just kind of other software increases. So that's a big chunk. And then the other ones would be playground maintenance, cafeteria replacement, boiler repairs. Those are big chunks, but it's completely necessary that we have to kind of get these done, safety reasons within the schools. There was a $1.1 million ad for AEA sick leave, and that's with their new contracts that we have a tentative agreement on, but has not been. But again, it's tentative; it hasn't been ratified or voted on, so that's still up in the air. But we do, if it does pass, that's about what it'll cost. We added some attrition into that negative adjustment I was talking about to about, I think, 4.5, 5.5 million. But it's really just to kind of track down what we're actually experiencing. We have so many vacancies out there, and trying to be able to accurately predict that is getting to be difficult, but we're doing our best with that. And then we talked about removing the transfer of the transportation fund and the school resource officers. We have put in the $2.3 million transfer to the city to pay for those. But this budget addresses our deficit and prioritizes our PTR ratios and helps us try to recover from COVID. And that's really what we wanted to share with the BAC today. And if you have any specific questions, we can take those now.
That was a really great presentation. Thank you both for all of you for taking the time out to give us that presentation. Do anyone have any other questions for
Mr. Jacobs is on too, if he would like to say any words about it as well.
Yep, Madam Chair, if I could, just another minute of the commission's time, I'll just say that I want to echo appreciation for staff, not only through the budget development process, but keeping schools open and making sure that in-person face-to-face education is occurring each and every day. A lot of hard work and collaboration is going on right now in campuses across the municipality, which is truly heartening. There are 2 opportunities for public comments on the budget at our February 8th, that's this upcoming Tuesday. and the 22nd meeting. I think the tentative plan at this point is for the board to conduct its work, which will include in-person one-on-one meetings, and then our regularly scheduled board meetings, and then potentially adopt a budget on the 22nd. And so definitely looking forward to hearing from our community as we move and navigate through the rest of this process. But I, like Andy and Jen, would be glad to try and answer any questions, or I can also take full feedback back to the full board. So thank you for all the time today.
Great, thank you. I thought it was just really, I did not realize that just sort of the all hands on deck with having staff filling in as substitutes just to make sure that schools stay open. And I just know from my own experience as a parent, ASD parent, that it's been a heroic effort. So I want to applaud you all for your part in keeping those doors open and kids in schools. And I also see that you are making adjustments on the fly with the union contract just voted in on Friday. So very, very quick work, and thank you all for that update. I think we are ready to move on, unless someone jumps in. All right, thank you again. Moving on, do we have a report from Ms. Frasca, OMB?
Hi, this is Marilyn Bonzoff from OMB. I'm the Deputy Director. I'm in the OMB conference room here with Lila Lawyer. Cheryl Frasca was not able to attend this meeting due to a previously scheduled absence. But I do want to thank the Assembly for certifying her, and I also worked with her before, and so I'm really looking forward to working for her again. I think she's going to be really good for the city, in my opinion. A couple other things. Mr. Assemblymember Dunbar did an excellent job of summarizing goings on in the city. Thank you very much for that. And thanks to the previous chair and vice chair for your services at this committee, and then also congratulations to the new chair and vice chair, and thank you for your service. For goings on in OMB, there's not much more to add. The city's in the process of closing our 2021 books. So our budget to actual presentations are paused until we have, until a lot more of the swirling is done, which will probably be March or April-ish. So that's that. And then we also have started the process of the 2022 revised budget. During this process, or the result of this process, will be the setting of the mill rates, and before that, the balancing the budget and the setting of the mill rates are with the objective of getting our presentations to the Assembly by the first meeting in April, which is April 12th. And that's all I've got at this time. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ms. Bonzoff. Does anyone have any questions? Any follow-up? Great, thank you. Moving on to the road service areas briefing. I see Mr. Robinson is on the line. Are you ready to present?
Yes. My name's Maury Robinson. I'm a manager with Public Works Admin, and our group provides administrative support to the various road service areas. Lila, if you have that road service area map for display. Within the state of Alaska, municipalities and the boroughs operate under a service area concept. And so that means areas outside the primary service area. So for Anchorage, it would be the Anchorage Bowl primarily, where there's, you have curb and gutter and lots of utilities and denser development. As you get out to the more rural areas of the municipality or the boroughs, services out there are not necessarily required by the local government. And so services out in these areas are provided by basically the residents of these areas have to petition and request services when you're beyond the primary service area. So at unification of when the borough and the city unified, many of these areas you see up here on the hillside petitioned and went through a process to create a road service area. And these road service areas are entities of the municipality or a borough where they're formed, and they provide road services on a different level than what you would see down in the bowl. Each of these service areas has a board. They, when they first establish, they create basically a mill rate cap that is calculated against the assessed valuation of the properties in this area, and that generates a budget that's utilized to provide road maintenance. The road maintenance contracts, so we develop a road maintenance contract. They're bid through our purchasing department, and a low bidder is selected. Typically it's low bidder, and they have to have a good track record. And the boards establish maintenance levels. So they determine, are we going to plow at 2 inches? Are we going to wait till it's 4 inches? Are we going to clean driveway berms? Are we not going to, so they determine a bunch of those types of service levels. They decide when they're going to do dust control, for instance, brushing, fixing potholes. So that they do a lot of that. Determine what activities they're going to do within the budget that their local road service area tax generates. And part of the requirement is they're supposed to have a quarterly meeting to discuss these things and come up with projects and deal with problems that are going on, that sort of thing. The board positions, they are elected, and they run on a 3-year rotation. And although there's no, they are unpaid, so they're volunteer positions, probably like you all. So that's kind of how that works. Lila, if you want to go to the next slide, I think it's the tax district map. It is a similar map. I'm not sure if y'all are familiar with this, but one thing that becomes really interesting with LRSAs is you can see on this September 2021, we have 57 different tax districts within the municipality. So what that means is you have, when you get your tax bill, you have area-wide schools, police, fire, parks, roads, building safety, and there's 57 different combinations of those taxes, of those services you're paying for on your tax bill. So with each LRSA, it creates another tax district, another little overlaying difference. On the hillside, there's 23 road service areas. And the low end of their mill rate is 1.0. The highest one is 2.75. The majority of them are around 1.5 range. So yeah, it creates kind of a complex accounting for collecting taxes for each of these areas. And I should also mention, it's not just road service that has different areas. The parks, Chugach River has their own park service, as does Girdwood, and they don't all match up perfectly. Same thing with fire service and police service, the building safety area. So there's 57 different combinations of tax districts. And coincidentally, I mentioned the board members are elected. So right now, a challenge with our clerk's office is it also creates probably a similar number of ballots that need to be created for each area. So that's quite a challenge also. But those that live in Alersa, one of the main benefits is you can see they're not real large. The biggest one on the hillside has about 18 miles, and several of them are, you know, right around a mile or less even. So with their own contract, they, you know, when it snows, I'm looking out my window, it's snowing right now. They get quick, timely service. You know, on the flip side, when you have a big road problem, it's tougher to you know, gather up funds to repair a, you know, a larger, expensive type road issue.
Mr. Armisen, I want to jump right in. Ms. Brawley has a question. Ms. Brawley has a question. I know she has to
Okay, go ahead.
momentarily.
Yeah, thanks. And I appreciate this because I was one of the ones who was interested in just understanding these because I live in basically all the area-wide service areas. So this isn't my lived experience, but I just wondered, I guess in terms of the governance, I wondered if, and you kind of alluded to it, I know there's not a single number, but I just wondered, do we have an idea of kind of the extra administrative costs of having this many service areas? Because I totally hear you that they're efficient in the sense of, you know, they have limited maintenance, but I wonder, for example, you know, do we have a lot of vacancies? Is it hard to fill these service areas? And then I'm curious about what the staff time is, like you said, to prepare. Anyway, again, I'm not anti-service area, but I just it's interesting to think of them as lower cost or limiting cost because they do seem to have a higher administrative cost overall. Thanks.
Yep. Yeah, the in code Title 27 addresses service areas, and one of the provisions in there is the municipality has a 12% administrative fee. So that's the cap. So each of them, as they form, they do have a portion when we calculate what the revenue requirement will be for their road maintenance, we include 12% number to make sure that's covered for administrative costs. Because each of these, they all have their own fund, they all have their own contract. So in that respect, it does create an admin fee, but I think it's adequate for what we're doing. And in terms of trying to keep boards, it is there are quite a few vacancies. I'd say 3/4 of them are filled, but a number of areas have at least one vacant seat. And I think just generally, you know, a number of these have one or two board members. Most boards are 3. We have half a dozen of them that have a 5-member board. I'd say just about everyone has somebody who's been on the board since their inception. And it could be a challenge when some of those folks decide to try and pass the torch and not file for re-election.
Okay, thanks. And that's helpful to know that there is admin costs built in, so that makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
And I think maybe we can go to the third slide, Lila. And it just for reference just shows some of the budgets. I think if you can you slide down to the bottom, please? Here we go. Yeah, so those are the totals. So we're not even close to the school district's budget presentation or their numbers, but all the LRSAs, and this includes Girdwood and the Chugach, Birchwood, Eagle River service area. So that in terms of dollars to the total municipal budget, the original budget is that 11.7 million number. And of that, the Chugach, Eagle River area, they comprise 7.3 million of that. And they're not a limited road service area, they're a rural road service area. So about half that of that 7.3 million is contributed to a capital fund where they do capital improvement. So they use that for their road, capital road work versus pursuing bond issuances. And then, the other big one is Girdwood at 1 point, just short of 1.2 million. And then the rest of those 23 road service areas up on the hillside are 3.3 million. And the smaller ones, their budget is, there's a number of them that's less than 20,000, and we have a couple that are over 700,000. So in terms of overall to the muni budget, it's not real big in terms of numbers. And like I said, the mill rates for these range from 1.0, and the high one is 2.75. And part of the reason they have a high mill rate, and this would be Glen Alps, is because they have a lot of mileage with of road with large undeveloped areas with property values. So that's why theirs is a little bit higher. And so just for reference, and I think that's about it. I just tried to keep it short and sweet and give you the 10,000 foot view. And if you have any other questions, I can take a stab at them also.
We did have one question. First of all, thank you so much for joining us today and for this presentation. I think it really is really helpful just to kind of have a better understanding and that overview. We were just wondering if we could get a copy of this presentation that we could, just these slides that we can
Sure.
post.
Yep.
Okay, great, thanks. And Lila, if you wouldn't mind sending that around, that would be wonderful.
And I guess I could say one more thing about this. It has the original budget and then the budget change portion. That mostly relates, that reminds me of typically these road service areas, their mill rate, they provide limited maintenance. And so typically what they do now that state grants aren't available, few and far between. So what they do is they try and save when they can and over each year accumulate fund balance. And when they have to do a larger repair job within their LRSA, so typically they'll save money for a number of years to be able to tackle a larger project. So what you see there is where one of these, a few of these service areas appropriated some money to tackle, what they would consider a major repair. And then after they do that, they start saving again to try and do that project again. So that's what that 888,000 is a few fund balance appropriations for some areas that took on a larger project.
Looks like Ms. Brawley has a question.
Yeah, thanks. And also just to say, I'll need to sign off in a couple minutes. But I was also just curious because I know we have John Weddleton here, and so not to put him on the spot, but I don't know if he had either any specific questions or just, John, I know you've been really active on Halo and a lot of the areas where these road services operate. So I didn't know if you had any other just comments or things that would be helpful for the BAC.
Well, I don't know. Maury did I think a good overview there, and pointed out, it is a good system. About 40% of the roads on the hillside are not in any formal road service area that uses property taxes to fund their work. They're, we call them independent road service areas, and pass a hat and do a variety of different ways. Some are homeowners associations, but a whole variety of ways of doing it. And for the most part, it works really well. Some drawbacks are uncoordinated drainage, and that's been discussed quite a bit in the hillside district plan. Every road service area just puts it in a ditch, and the ditch goes downhill, and good luck to the road service area down below, and that's not always very efficient. So there are challenges with it, but a lot of pluses. Changing it is difficult because it takes a dual majority vote. So were 2 to 1 to merge, you'd have to have both majorities and both of them merge. So it's just hard to coordinate any kind of consolidation, but it's been discussed often, but very hard to make it happen. But at any rate, it's generally a good system. There's a few weaknesses though.
I see Ms. Hall has her hand raised.
Hi, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Robinson, for your presentation. It's really interesting. And I'm wondering, can you maybe offer a little bit of a bigger perspective? Are LRSs typical outside, or is this kind of unique to the Anchorage area?
No, the Kenai, Matsu, Fairbanks, North Star, they all have the same road service area set up. And in fact, I think a couple of them even have a lot more road service areas than we do, just because they have a huge geographical area. Matsu has quite a few, and some of those little side streets you see way up by Trapper Creek off the Parks Highway, that there could be a limited road service area right there. So yeah, no, it's not unique to the municipality. All the boroughs have them also.
Madam Chair, if I can have a follow-up?
Of course.
Thank you. I guess I wasn't really clear with my question. I apologize. I'm wondering if this is unique to, I guess, maybe Alaska. Do other places, cities, regions outside have this kind of setup as well?
Yeah, my understanding is that they do. I grew up in North Dakota, which has a lot of little towns and a lot of farm roads that go out into the rural areas, and they have a similar deal in a number of the counties. They go by different names, but it works very similar, where they have a different maintenance level, and then those folks that live out there pay a lower tax rate for a lower service, because the need isn't as high as what you'd have in the cities. And I'm familiar with some more. I think Colorado has a similar deal too, and I'm guessing if I dug into it, several others would have a similar setup out in probably in the counties.
All right, great. Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Robinson. This was a really helpful presentation. And we really just have a couple minutes left. So if we move to, the audience participation, I see a couple of folks on here I don't recognize. If anyone wants to participate or bring anything up, now's your chance. I don't see anyone. Oh, yes, I can hear you.
Hi. Pardon me. Yeah, my name is Hans Thompson. I was the one that brought up the SRO issue. I just want to speak to a couple of things. I want to thank everyone for their time and work on this. It's just been me asking about this, so I appreciate everyone talking. Everyone's been forthright, from ASD to APD, and I appreciate the BAC looking into this. I do have some kind of additional questions, and I question the accounting of SROs not being in kind. I think the suggestion that I think Mr. Anderson was making, that only a court could determine the real interpretation, sounded a bit uncertain. I think it would be good to look into this further without having to go to a court. I certainly don't have the resources, but I think it makes sense to look into it. And for reasons I stated before, I believe that this is a special service to ASD from APD. APD officers, their SRO officers, have special training to educate students, and their educational programs are promoted on their social media. Their security service that they provide is directly offset security guards after the program's inception. I saw from a post from David Reamer, Anchorage historian, that he posted an old ADN piece that showed cuts to the school districts across time, and in the 2003-2004 year, the year after the SRO program started, they cut basic security guards. And I know that it's small potatoes for the big machine, and everyone matters, but it's something that I think we should look at, because really it has a history of offsetting school costs for security. And then additionally, kind of this idea that it's, the budget of it has gone back and forth between the municipality and ASD and split halfway at different times. I think it's a bit oblique to kind of look at it and say, well, the ASD can provide money for other services like APD, but we can't do it the other way because of the BSA. I mean, ASD then could hypothetically pay for alley paving, and that wouldn't contribute towards the BSA. I would wonder if, in the fact we have made those SRO payments contribute towards the BSA in the past, that would be a question I have for ASD. They've offered to write a letter to the BAC, you guys, and I would hope that maybe you would take them up on that, explaining their reason for that. And also, I would like to submit another letter that would be passed on through Layla, I think, to you guys. So thanks for your time.
Thank you for those comments. Is there anyone else who would like to chime in? All right, moving on to the BAC open discussion. Did anyone have anything here? I know we're over time, so I would imagine anything we could bring up next meeting, which brings us to our final item. Our next meeting is set for March 3rd, and with your new chair and vice chair, Anna Brawley and Nolan Clouda. And with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
This is Tasha. Move to adjourn.
This is Carolyn. I'll second.
All right, and with that, we are adjourned at 1:02 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.